I'm going to talk all about foam rolling. So this is really, I think, something that I do a lot. Those of you who do come in and see me in the practice, you may see me from time to time, although I do often sneak in and do it in my office. But I do some form of foam rolling most days. And the one that I do most commonly will be the first one I'm actually going to show you. And I have done another video on that, which is titled, I think, the posture pole. Which you can find on my YouTube channel, and you can also find in the Healthy Lifestyle Choices Facebook group, which is where all of these videos kind of accumulate, where I post them all online there along with links to them, as well as lots of other health and wellness information. And if you want to ask me questions about that, if you're watching this not live, then that's the best spot to go. It is a free group. You can just find it on Facebook. Just search for Healthy Lifestyle Choices. But really, the reason I like foam rolling, the reason I do foam rolling, the reason I recommend foam rolling to many of my practice members, and I know this will be a video that I will share with many of my practice members, is that it's really good for improving your posture, which is a big thing in our society today. We all sit too much, and as a result, we see a lot of postural issues, and a lot of what I see in practice is as a result of postural stress. What that postural stress often leads to is a lack of joint range of motion. Obviously that can be a global lack of motion, or it can be a very specific lack of motion. And when we're looking at those really specific lacks of motion and the resultant nerve interference that comes from that, then that's obviously what we deal with a lot as chiropractors, because that can be very hard to get that individual joint moving by yourself. That's something you tend to need some help from a professional for. However, in terms of some of the more global range of motion, once you get those individual joints moving better, then there's some stuff you can do. And so we'll talk about that as we go along in terms of the importance of segmental versus global approaches. Much of the stuff that I will talk to you about tonight, I don't tend to recommend to people when they first come to see me in the practice, because I like to get the underlying structure right. I like to know that everything is moving well. I like to know that everything's pretty stable and there's good neurological function before I get people doing these sort of exercises, whether that be rehab or what I like to call prehab, which is doing it before it becomes a problem or an injury. I like to get the integrity right first. So usually when someone comes in to see me in the practice, or if someone who isn't coming to see me in the practice, I'm cautious to recommend these kind of things. However, once we've got the underlying function right, the joints are moving well, the nerves are free from interference, there is good range of motion so that all of the joints can move, because sometimes with these sort of stretches and exercises, the first one I'll do is a good example of that. We're looking to get all of the joints moving and coming into a better posture, but if all of those joints aren't moving well, if only some of those joints are moving well, then the ones that aren't moving are going to sort of stay stuck. The ones that are moving are going to have to move even more to compensate for it, and sometimes that can cause more problems than it solves. So that's just a bit of a preamble and a caution in terms of all this stuff we're going to talk about tonight. You do need to be careful. Make sure you're doing it safely. Ideally, be doing it in conjunction with your health professional. All those sort of warnings that we put in at this stage, right? So, but it can improve a joint range of motion. It is something that can be used for injury prevention. By doing this sort of maintenance for your body, maintenance for your spine, maintenance for your muscles. You can help prevent joint injuries and muscle injuries and ligament injuries as well. Many people will use it as part of recovery. Often that is sport recovery or exercise recovery, but really it can be just life recovery. Sometimes these are good things to do after doing the gardening or breastfeeding your child, or carrying around your child, or whatever it is, playing golf, whatever it is that you do. This can be good recovery for that. Obviously, it can be used to reduce pain, and many people will kind of wait until they're in pain before deciding to do some foam rolling and do stuff like this. And whilst I understand that that's what people do, and I'm guilty of that from time to time myself, so I do get it. But I also understand that the real benefits of doing this sort of work, much like the real benefits of chiropractic, are in doing it beforehand, so that not only are you preventing those injuries and those problems and those pains from occurring, but you're also keeping your body performing at its best in the meantime. And that really is the last point in terms of the benefits of foam rolling. It's not just about aches and pains and injury prevention, it's actually about performance. So you'll note that a lot of athletes nowadays are being much more proactive about this sort of mobility work, because they know that not only does it stop them getting injured, but it helps them perform at their best. And In the same way, in your life, you can use this sort of mobility and flexibility and stretching and rehab sort of work to keep yourself performing at your best in whatever everyday athletics you do. Like I said, whether that's with your kids, whether that's in your garden, whether that's at work, whatever it is that you need to do. All right? So I'm going to be showing everything I do today with the long foam roller. And some of the exercise, and the reason for that is just for simplicity. The long foam roller is really versatile. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. Some stuff that you can't do with a shorter foam roller. However, some of these that I'll be showing you today might even actually be a little bit easier to do with a shorter foam roller. And some of them I think are better done with a spiky ball. I meant to grab a spiky ball before I came and sat down here. I've got them up on the cupboard up there. I won't get it, but you know what I mean. The little sort of hockey ball sized balls, the little spiky hard ones. Some of the exercises are probably even better done with those. However, all of them can be done with the long foam roller, which is why I've decided just to make this easy so that if you don't have any of those things, there's kind of only one thing you need to get. If you don't have one, you can get them here at Healthy Choices Chiropractic, or whoever your local chiropractor is, or from Kmart or Clark's Rubber, or whatever the store is near you. You can find them kind of all over the place nowadays. So we're going to do it with the long foam roller. Before we start, I thought I'd talk just a little bit about breathing. One person who I follow quite a lot and get some of the ideas from this workshop from is a guy called Kelly Starrett. He wrote an amazing book called Becoming a Supple Leopard, which is like a maintenance manual for your body. It just covers so much stuff. Primarily, I think, originally targeted towards the CrossFit community because they need this stuff. However, it can be used in a huge variety of ways to help maintain the mobility of your body and keep your body functioning well. So Kelly's really good. He's got a huge array of stuff available online. He's got courses and programs you can sign up for specific ailments and conditions, and he goes a lot more in-depth into each of these individual areas than I probably will. So if you're looking for more nitty-gritty on any of these areas, that might be a good spot to start or to go to. But this is probably a good spot to start because it's going to give you a great general overview of a lot of stuff. And it's going to give you really a pretty simple, what have I got, 13 different things that you can do that will really cover most of the body. Okay, so there's a lot we're going to cover and a lot we can do. But if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of the anatomy and the different tools you can use and the different ways of stretching and learn how to do each of these things in 7 different ways, then Kelly's great for that too. So, the first one I'm going to talk to you about is using the posture pole, or using the foam roller as a posture pole. And once again, this is the one that I probably recommend the most in practice, because what I see commonly is flexed postures as a result of people hunched over too much, sitting too much, not maintaining their posture there, their shoulders round, their shoulders come forward, their head comes forward, and so that's what we see a lot, okay? And so I'll show you this one, and then Kim, I'll come back to your question in just a second because I see there's a long question there. I'll check that in just a sec. All right, but first one, and so this is really simple, and this is, hopefully you guys can still see me. Okay, yeah, that's looking all right. I'll try not to kick my mic as I do it, but this is just simply, you put your tail right down one end of the pole and you lay lengthways on it, okay? Now what you want to do to really help with this is tuck your pelvis under, so I'm flattening out my lower back against the pole. So because most people do, we sit too much, we have tight hip flexors, as we have that anterior pelvic tilt. So we're reversing that by tucking our pelvis under and lengthening out our lower back against the pole. And same up in our neck. Most of us have that forward head carriage with a hyperextended upper neck. Well, now we want to do the opposite. We want to lengthen our neck down towards the posture pole, and we want to tuck our chin right in. So we're lengthening our neck and we're flexing right at the top of that C1. Okay, so this is the position we want to get in. Just checking what I've got down there. Yep. And if you can do that with your legs straight, I'm kicking stuff, then that's going to be even better in terms of starting to open up those hip flexors as well. Now, if you want to make this more active, once again, particularly for people who do tend to have a bit of an anterior pelvic tilt, they then tend to have a bit of an increased curvature in the lumbar spine, potentially a bit of a rib flare, so the ribs coming out a little bit, and then that rounding in the upper back. That's a classic posture we see a lot because, like I said, we all just sit too much. And so one of the more active exercises you can do here on the posture pole is actually engaging your abdominals, so sort of bringing those ribs down, engaging your abdominals and pulling your core in tight. And then while you're doing that, practicing some overhead movement, okay? So bringing your arms up above your head. Now I can't see this video, but hopefully if you're looking at that from side on, I'm doing that without losing the control and the stability in my core, and I'm keeping that in check, okay? And so that is actually quite challenging to do, to really hold that hard whilst you bring your arms overhead can be quite challenging. And if that's not challenging enough for you, you can actually add some weight into that as well. All right, and so that's a really good stretch. That's a really good one you can do for your posture. One of the things we know about our posture is that our ligaments deform over time, right? So it takes time for your ligaments to change, which is why things like sitting, where you're in that position for a long period of time, has a big impact. But then it also takes time for them to change in the opposite direction too, which is why something like a posture pole, where you can just lie on it pretty comfortably for a period of time, at least once you get the hang of it. You know, usually people start with less time and gradually build up to more time as they go along. But certainly you can start with that, a couple of minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, but you can build it up to 10 or 15 minutes as well, okay? So there's ways you can go about doing that. And that's a good way to get some length of time into those ligaments, so you can create some real change and deformation in terms of the ligaments and the joints and their alignment. Okay, so that's why the length of time is really important, and that's why I think that's such a good one. So that's number one. Before I move on to the second one, I'm just going to have a quick look at this question from Kim and Aaron. I've been trying to stretch and massage my ITB band on a roller. It absolutely kills. I struggle to get through 10 seconds. Any tips for easing into it without causing pain and discomfort in my arms and neck as I try to roll? Okay, cool. All right, we'll talk about that. Pain and tension in your arms and neck as you try and roll out your ITB. Is that just confirm that for me, Kim, and I'll come back to that. But it's a little bit further down my list. It's number 7 on my list. We're going to come to that, and I am going to talk about some tips and strategies. So stay tuned. Won't be long, and we'll be down to that one. All right. The second one I want to talk about in terms of exercises you can do on the foam roller is probably the one that I see most commonly recommended online, and the one that most people like to do, that I want to caution you about, okay? And that is just rolling the foam roller up and down your spine, particularly your upper spine. Well, actually, both parts of your spine. But where you see it a lot is people rolling their upper spine up and down the foam roller. So what that looks like is something like this, okay? Getting the foam roller under and bringing a lot of extension back into that upper back, okay? Now, you might say, well, yes, you've just said that most people have too much flexion in their upper back, and that's absolutely true. And most people could benefit from bringing some extension back into that upper back, and that is also absolutely true. However, there's a couple of things I'll say about that. First of all is that that deformation over time that we spoke about, you may actually get more benefit from laying lengthways on the foam roller. Even though it's maybe not necessarily going to make things pop and crack quite so much, it might not release those endorphins that can get released when that happens, and you might not have that instant hit of, oh, that feels better when it does pop and crack. But the length of time you can spend laying lengthways on that foam roller can actually be more beneficial in terms of creating real change, particularly to the ligaments that, as I said, do deform more over time. Right? The other challenge with doing it that way, going up and down like that, is you're going to be stressing out your individual joints. Okay, now obviously as a chiropractor we work with doing that all the time, getting onto individual joints and getting them to shift and to move, but it's very specific, right? We don't adjust every single joint in your spine from the bottom to the top, and that's for a reason, right? Because some of those joints are what we would call subluxated, right? They're restricted, they're dysfunctional, they're causing interference to your spine and nervous system. But as a result of those dysfunctional restricted joints, there are other joints which are dysfunctional and hypermobile, okay? And that's where you need to be careful, because if you're then stretching those hypermobile joints over a foam roller, potentially making them more hypermobile, potentially making the problem worse, or potentially irritating an already inflamed and angry joint, then once again, that can actually cause more problems than it solves. And we see that in the practice, with people coming in and they're like, well, I feel like I've got some hypermobility here. And it's like, what have you been doing? Well, I've been rolling backwards and forwards over the foam roller. I get up and I crack my back and I crack my neck every night. Then that can actually cause problems, okay? So be really wary. I think the rolling up and down over the spine, I know it feels good. And I would say, if you're really well adjusted, if all of those segments in your spine are moving well and they're functioning well and they're stable and they've been that way for long enough for you to build the muscular stability and the ligamentous stability around them to hold them in that position, then it's probably okay. It's probably quite good. I look at myself and think, well, I've been getting adjusted once a week since I was about 18 years old. That's a while now. I'm not going to tell you how long, but that's a while now. And so, I look at my spine and think I can probably do that without that causing me any problems. However, for many people, I think you need to be careful with that one. I think you need to be particularly careful if you're doing that in your lower back for the same reasons, but also because for many people, in their lower back, many people do have that anterior pelvic tilt. They've already got an increased lumbar lordosis. They've already got an increased curvature in the small of their back, and this is actually just making it worse. It's actually exacerbating it by pushing up into the middle of the back and exaggerating that curve even further, okay? Now, for many people it will feel good because it is also at the same time going to be rolling up and down those muscles on each side of the spine, those big erector muscles, which can be pretty sore, and you might want to try and release and free up. It might make you feel better, all right? So if you do want to do that, you can get, what do we call it, a twin roller, all right? And so the twin roller essentially has, a fatter bit either side and a skinnier bit in the middle. In other words, it allows for your spine to sit in the middle and not get impacted quite so much by the roller. I still think it's less than ideal, but it does put more of the pressure onto the muscles on either side, and that's going to be better for doing that. You may use something like one of those little peanuts. If you've seen those little peanut-shaped ones, they have a little knob each side and a little bit of a gap in the middle, and that can be a way of doing that as well without putting quite as much pressure on your spine. So once again, I'd be really careful with doing that, but if you do want to do it, make sure it's at least with a twin roller rather than a flat roller. All right, Kim says, actually, is it Kim or Aaron? I'm not sure which one it is. It's Kim and Aaron is the name, but anyway, sorry for skipping ahead. I lay on my side, try rolling between hips and just above the knee. My weight's rest on the side. So arms, well, it's so painful down that band on the leg. Yeah, okay. So we'll talk about a couple of things about that once again when we get to it. So just remind me if I haven't answered your question, but I should be able to answer that when we get to it. All right, so now we're going to talk about sort of from the ground up what else we can do. Those are the more sort of general postural exercises that we can do. But from the ground up, well, I meant to take my shoes off before I started, so I'll just show you this one. And I totally forgot. I've been doing my experiments at the moment with my correct toe spaces. I don't know if you've seen that on my social media, but if you haven't, you can see my progress with that for my somewhat flat and bunched up toes. On my social media, if you go to my Dr. Brett Hill Instagram, you can sort of get the update on that there. And I will at some stage probably do one of these videos in the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group all about toe spacing, barefoot movement, barefoot running, all that kind of stuff. But that's one for the future. Anyway, this one is really just a simple one for the soles of the feet. Once again, this is probably one that is better done with a spiky ball, all right, because it can get a little bit more specific points of contact. However, this might actually be a good way to start if you're finding a spiky ball or a golf ball or a squash ball or whatever you've been using a bit too tender, or a tennis ball. Then the foam roller can be a nice way to start rolling out the bottom of your feet. Okay, so if you spend a lot of time in orthotics, if you spend a lot of time in structured shoes with built-up arch supports that don't allow your feet a lot of movement, then just a little bit of time just to bring some movement back into your feet and ankles like this could be a really good idea. Right? So this can be good for people with plantar fasciitis, Achilles pain, calf pain, even foot pain, even people who are a bit flat-footed. Just getting some movement back into those feet can actually be a really good idea. All right, so that's pretty simple. I'm going to do both sides just because I want to keep myself nice and even, and I'm actually going to get a nice little foam rolling session in while I'm describing this all to you. So that's the soles of the feet. Right, the next one is going to be the tibialis anterior. Now that is the outside part of your shin. So this is one really good for people with shin splints. Okay, so once again, if you do have shin splints, you want to have a look at what's happening in terms of your spine and your lower back and those nerves going and supplying all the muscles down and around the feet and ankles. You might want to have a look at your hips and your knees. You might want to see a podiatrist and see what's going on with your ankles. But if you're doing, a lot of load, you might be doing a lot of running, you might be doing football, those sort of things where you are putting some load on those shins and on those calves, then shin splints is something that people do suffer from. And this one is essentially what you're doing. You don't want to run it up and down your shin, obviously that's not very comfortable. So you'll see that I'm sort of, as I do this, I'm rolling my hips out to my right, so towards you, so that the outer part of my shin, or sort of the muscles on the outer side of my shin, are actually what's on top of the foam roller, okay? And so you can roll those up and down. Now obviously if you've got really acute shin splints, that they're really inflamed and painful right now, then you might need to be careful with this. This might be a good one in the long term, but you might need to rest them up a little bit first before you can get in and start doing this. Or you might just want to start gently, maybe lifting up more with your hands and with your back leg, so that you're not putting as much weight on it, and don't do it for quite so long, just ease your way into it if it is already a bit hot and inflamed. Right, so I'm just going to do that. Same thing on the other side. You might be able to see what I'm doing a bit there in terms of, you'll see my foot is then angling towards you just to get on that outer aspect, okay? And so that's the tibialis anterior. And then if we roll over, we can start doing some pretty simple ones, all right? So tight calves, for many people who sit for long periods of time at work, or once again, people who run, people who cycle, people who play ball sports, people with ankle problems, people with knee problems. You might find your calves get tight, and you can just roll them backwards and forwards on the foam roller like this. Obviously, it does take a degree of fitness to be able to do that, but you can modify it as well. Right? You can sort of do it just with your bum on the ground. You can do it just one leg at a time. If I do it this way so you can see a little bit better, you can just do it with one leg at a time. And in many ways, doing it one leg at a time, I'm going to lift up because it is a little bit easier for me to get into the different parts of my ankle if I do it that way. Should fall a little bit. And in many ways, doing it one leg at a time is better, and one hand at a time is better because it means I can rotate, right? And I can get into the outer aspect of the calf, the middle of the calf, the outer aspect of the calf, right? And I can do, once again, do the same both sides, right? Rolling up and down the outer side there, the inner side. And I can definitely feel that I'm a bit tighter on the outer side of my calf, right? And that's one thing I've been working on as I've been starting to regain some of the mobility of my feet using the toe spaces. So this might be one I keep doing over the next few weeks and months, all right? And then from your calves, you can move up to your hamstrings. Once again, a lot of people playing ball sports, a lot of people who sit too much, a lot of people with back problems, a lot of people with knee problems might have really tight hamstrings, okay? And obviously back problems are often a cause of tight hamstrings as well. That one goes both ways. All right? And so if you just roll that backwards and forwards on your hamstring, you can do one side at a time again, and roll in and out to try and get to different aspects of the hamstring. All right? But that's quite a nice one to roll out. And really, for many of these, they just feel good, It just feels good to be doing it that way. And if you can do it, I realised at the start of this, when I started talking about Kelly Starrett, I didn't actually finish talking about why I was talking about Kelly Starrett. And the reason I was talking about him was, one of the things he recommends as you're doing this is to control your breathing. So he says that, one of the things you can do that will A, help you relax, and B, provide some additional, de-stressing, relaxing, winding down mechanisms to this sort of foam rolling, particularly if you're doing it post-exercise or at the end of the day, which is often what he recommends, is to do a controlled breathing. And what he says is, take a nice deep breath in, hold it for a few seconds, and then breathe out for more than 6 seconds, 8 seconds ideally. And so what that is just activating that parasympathetic nervous system, de-stressing your body, allowing your whole system to tone down and relax, and that really helps with the relaxation you're getting out of these exercises. All right, so that's the hamstrings. Once again, pretty straightforward. If you guys have any questions about these, then by all means let me know. But now we're going to move on to the ITB and the TFL, Kim and Aaron. And so this is one that is very common, one that I do recommend a lot. There is some debate in the literature about whether it really helps and whether it does anything, and whether it is in fact the ITB or the TFL or what it is that has the effect here. My experience is that this can be a really useful one and one that does help, particularly for people who have patellar tracking problems. And so when you get that sort of pain under your knee, pain behind the kneecap, that's often that patellar tracking problem, and it can be caused by an imbalance between the inside and the outside of the knee. So tightness down the lateral side, weakness on the medial side of the knee. So what I'm usually recommending for those people is to spend time squatting with their knees out, right? So that you're actually training that inner aspect of the knee and building up that strength on the inside, but then rolling out the outside, okay? So this is the one you asked about, Kim. I find these can be really uncomfortable, all right? And so I find the key to doing this without it being too uncomfortable, having both hands on the ground and having this foot firmly planted in a point that gives quite a bit of extra support, okay? So if you're doing it that way, then that's not going to you can actually do that in a way that doesn't put too much pressure. In fact, you can actually do it so it's not putting much pressure at all onto that ITB, okay? And so that should help in terms of taking some of the pressure off of the leg, okay? The other thing that you can do that helps take some of the pressure off is instead of working right where it really hurts in that ITB, you can really focus on working just above it a little bit. Work on that first, try and free that up, whether that's within one session where you try and free that up and then see if you can move down, or whether that's over time, where you just literally just focus on the bit above it that's more comfortable, and then see whether over time that starts to free up downstream as well. And you may find that it does, okay? In terms of problems that's causing to the neck and to the shoulders, I guess my first point of call would be to say, get checked by a good chiropractor. Get your upper back and your neck and your shoulders checked out, because there may be some structural issues there that might be contributing to the problem. If you're already doing that, then probably some of the next topics we're going to talk about in terms of freeing up those shoulders might actually be really beneficial. I suspect there might be some rounding of the shoulders coming in a little bit that might be exacerbating that problem, and possibly a bit of a forward head carriage that might be exacerbating that problem. Or there might just be some stability issues, so it might be that you want to work on building up some strength and stability with things like maybe a plank that can help build up some strength in the shoulders and the neck, keeping it in a really nice alignment, okay? So hopefully a couple of tips there. You said, thank you, that is much better. I had my leg bent behind. Placing in front like that just showed it's much more comfortable. All right, excellent. That was easy. Perfect. You've obviously got your foam roller there and you're doing it as we go along, Kim. That's great. So yes, glad I could give you a little tip there that makes it a little bit easier. And as I said, as I keep working on that, that should get easier and more comfortable as well. Just going to have a little bit of water there. All right. So now we're going to talk about working on the glutes. Once again, the glutes are one that are often tight from lots of sitting, but also, from lots of exercise. So if you're doing, lots of squats, those sort of things, then you may be getting quite tight in the glutes. But we do see a lot of people, particularly people with lower back pain, who have issues with tightness in the glutes and the piriformis muscles as well. And so this can be a good one to do. Once again, the glutes can be pretty simple. I find trying to do the glutes two-legged, it's kind of uncomfortable, like your sacrum and your coccyx sort of gets in the way, and that's not super comfortable. So this is definitely one where I find it's better to go sort of one, I'm going to kick my mic, sorry about that, to go one side than the other, right? And so you can just roll that glute, and once again, as with most of these, it generally feels pretty good. Like if you haven't got a real issue there, then it's actually quite nice. It's like just getting a bit of a massage just to roll it out and feel pretty good. So you could easily just go through this routine of these 13 movements each day, and it'd be a nice little session, and I think you'd come away feeling like you just had a half-hour massage. So if you can't afford a half-hour massage, this might be the way to do it, and get a bit of comfort and a bit of relaxation in at the end of your day. So that's the glute. The other thing you can do with the glute is bring that leg up into that sort of figure four position, and that just adds a little bit of extra tension into that piriformis, and gives it even a bit more workout as you go through there as well. Okay, so then we move over. Once again, we're going to move into the quads and particularly the hip flexors. All right, so quads, once again, something you see tight a lot in people who are doing a lot of sport, running, ball kicking type sports. Hip flexors we see short and tight on most people. Once again, I feel like a broken record here, but once again, because we just sit too much. Okay, and so the quads, once again, pretty simple. You can easily do this one both-legged, okay, and you're just rolling up and forward. Now, one thing to pay attention to as you're doing this is a good one for sort of testing your posture and your spinal stability, okay? So as you're doing this, take note, like, are you arching your back a lot, okay, as you're rolling out those quads? That's a sign that you don't have that core stability and that alignment in your lower back, okay? So practice sort of switching on, all right? But don't switch on to the point where you're, oh, hang on, where am I going? That way. See, now what I'm doing is I'm really rounding my upper back, okay? And so you don't want to do that either. So we want to switch on and see if we can maintain your spine in a nice neutral position. So it might even be beneficial to have a camera like this, all right, because I can sort of play around with it. So hang on, where am I going? There we go. Activate there, and I can keep it nice and straight, all right? So you might want to do this in front of a mirror. You might want to do this in front of a camera when you first start out, and see if you can maintain that nice alignment of your spine whilst you're doing your quads like that. And then you can obviously also do that one-legged. All right, so the easiest way to do that is just to move that roller along, so you're sort of at the end of the roller, and you can do that one-legged, and oh, that definitely gets a bit more in there. I definitely did lots of squats earlier in the week, so I'm feeling that. And you can roll that around to the inside and to the outside as well, so you can get those different aspects. Okay, and then I'll come back with another question there, so I'll come back to that in just a sec. And then obviously, once again, at the end of the roller there, is coming up, you can come right up a bit higher and get into those hip flexors as well, okay? And so that's sort of just not going right over your pelvis, but just right up close to your pelvis and close to your groin, and really get into those additional hip flexors as well as the quadriceps, which of course are hip flexors as well, right? And really freeing those up. And so if you sit a lot in the office, then you really want to try and focus on getting in and freeing up those. And the other way to do that is what I often refer to as the rifleman stretch, because that's how we got taught it, which is this sort of pose as if you were a rifleman. So you just use the foam roller here just to lean on, and you drive those hips forward, okay? And you want to be feeling that at the front of your hip flexor here, and you want to be driving those hips right forward. Once again, maintain the integrity of your spine as you do that. Don't round, don't hyperextend. Keep that nice and neutral as you stride forward and stretch out those hip flexors. So that's a good one to do whilst you're doing that. You can add that one in as well. And whilst it's not strictly using the foam roller, you're using it to hold you up. So I thought I'd add that one in. All right, Ashley Jackson says, if you have people who struggle to put pressure on wrists and elbows, are there adaptations you recommend for lower limb rolling, or would you suggest something else? Yeah, it's a good question. I'd probably, it depends. Right? If it's wrists, or then transitioning to your elbows will usually work okay. If it's elbows, then that can make it a little bit tougher. All right. So in terms of that lower limb stuff, because you do kind of need to prop yourself up a little bit to do it. So I would probably suggest for someone who has those sort of issues with their wrists and their elbows, they might want to consider something like one of those therapy guns, you know, those rat-a-tat-tat sort of guns. That might be, or even like one of those little sticks that you can sort of roll up and down. Once again, both of those, I guess, are still using the wrists and the elbows, but certainly with less pressure, you know, not having to carry your body weight. Or they might just need to go and see a remedial massage therapist to do that for them instead. So yeah, obviously it's a bit harder to do if you have got those limitations, depending on the degree of those limitations and how much you can sort of problem solve and work around them. But if not, yeah, that's probably a couple of other options in terms of ways you can do it. Some of the stuff you can do up against the wall, particularly if you've got a shorter foam roller, because the long foam roller up against the wall is a bit unwieldy. And so you may be able to adapt, I mean, you could easily do, for example, your glutes up against the wall. Once again, I'd probably then do that with a spiky, I'm going to grab the spiky ball, just one sec. If you're doing your glutes up against the wall, I'd probably then do it with the spiky ball rather than the foam roller, just because it's going to be easier to get in there and hit the right spots. All right, so that would be something to consider. One word of warning, using a spiky ball against the wall, don't do it on the gyprock wall, because you'll end up with lovely little dents all through your gyprock. Speaking from someone who's done it myself before. So make sure it's a nice solid wall that you're doing that against. It's a trap for young players. I know many people have fallen into that same trap. Maybe you can let me know if you have. All right, the next one, we're going to be talking about the adductors. There's no nice way of demonstrating this one. This one just always looks a little bit dodgy. So you're going to enjoy it. This might end up on like the blooper reel later on. But essentially, the adductor stretch, if you've got groin pain, if you've got knee pain, then this might be one that is beneficial for you. And you're just going to get this foam roller right into those adductors, so the inner aspect of your thigh, and you're going to roll that one in and out. As I said, there's no sort of elegant way to do this. You probably don't want to do this one in the middle of the gym. This might be one to do at home in your own private space, and unless your gym crush is there, maybe this is the one you want to do, right? But this one does look a little bit sus sometimes. So, but you're just really just getting in there and freeing up those adductors. And so for anyone with sort of groin pains, groin issues, that can really help. Okay. So that's the adductors. Now we're going to start moving towards the upper body, and we start talking about the rotator cuff and the lats. Okay. So once again, if you're doing lots of overhead type work, if you're doing lots of, I get really tight lats a lot because I do a lot of pull-ups with my CrossFit training. A lot of people who are doing repetitive overhead work, like for example hairdressers, constantly holding your arms up like that, do get a lot of tension in the rotator cuff and potentially in the lats as well. People who spend too much time on the front and not enough time on the back at the gym can have a real imbalance in the shoulders. Can cause problems here, and obviously once again people with bad posture, as soon as your upper back rounds and your head comes forward, your shoulder will tend to come forward and internally rotate, puts it at a big disadvantage. Your rotator cuff will tighten up, you'll jam up that shoulder joint, end up with bursitis up the top. So if you're experiencing that sort of shoulder pain, I've done a whole video on that. So if you go to, once again, my Healthy Lifestyle Choices group, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll be able to find that video that I've done on solutions for shoulder pain, and I'll go into this in even more detail. Once again, I do typically find the spiky ball is a better way to do this. However, you can do it with the foam roller as well. And really all you're doing is sort of getting under I always call it the back of your armpit, essentially. Here, you get the sort of front, you've got the dip in the middle, and you've got the muscles at the back. And you're just getting in there, finding the tight spots. Once again, as I said, because I do a bit of CrossFit and I do a bit of overhead work, I've pretty much always got, and I play cricket, so I'm using that front of the shoulders, I've always got tight spots in here. So this is one that is good for me to do on a regular basis. Once again, I typically do it with a spiky ball, but you can do this one with this as well. All right, so if you find your shoulders are constantly rounding forward, if you find that you are getting pain in your shoulders or shoulder bursitis, or you're just not happy with the posture and the way your shoulders are sitting, then this is good to get into that rotator cuff at the back there. Okay, we're almost there. All right. Melissa likes the gym crush comment. Yeah, I thought you guys might like that. Do it appropriately. Don't be too inappropriate at the gym, but I think a little bit of flirting's still allowed, isn't it? Anyway, I won't get into that topic. I'll get myself in trouble. All right, now we're going to talk about the wrist extensors. Okay, so this is these muscles on the outside of your wrist. So if you're getting elbow pain, if you're getting tension in those wrist extensors, we see this a lot in people going to the gym doing grip work. Right, so once again, I find this if I'm doing pull-ups or if I'm doing kettlebell swings, things like that. where I'm having to hold on and I'm using those grips, then I'll tend to get sore in there and can cause tension in those muscles and can cause elbow pain. Obviously, the other person you see this at a lot in is the office worker that's constantly extending their wrists to use their keyboard and their mouse and that sort of stuff. You can get quite tied up in through there. All right, so you guys might be able to do this better than me because you've probably got more shoulder range of motion than me. But essentially, what you're going to do is put your elbow down, right? You're going to externally rotate your hand as far as you can. So you're kind of trying to get your thumb right over and down as far towards the floor as you can, so that you're getting that outside aspect of your arm, and then you're rolling that backwards and forwards, okay? Once again, you can typically, if I'm feeling sore in this area, I will typically do it with the spiky ball, right? And I will just get that in there and roll it and try and free it up. You end up with some sort of weird looking dents and bruises in there sometimes, but that's the way I would typically do it. This is a nicer way to do it. It's a little bit more gentle. It might not be quite as effective, but I think if you do it like that and you can get your body weight right into it, you'll probably still get some pretty good results doing that using the foam roller. And as I said earlier, that might mean that you only need to buy one implement rather than buying several implements to get the job done. Now, the final one of these is one that I think I'm actually going to try and introduce into my routine a little bit more. I found this as I was doing research for this one, and I quite like it. So the child pose, which you may know is sort of that yoga pose where we're getting right down and we're bringing some extension into the upper back, bringing some extension into the shoulders. That's a really nice stretch. I find myself just innately wanting to do that when I've been doing lots of chest work or above the shoulder work in the gym or lots of push-ups. It's a really nice way to do it. But with the foam roller, you can actually make this even a little bit more active and make it really nice as well. And so what you're now doing then is you sort of put your wrist down onto the foam roller out in front of you, and then you can just roll that forward. And once again, get a really nice extension into that upper back. It's a nice extension into that shoulders. Once again, you'll notice I don't have a huge amount of extension into those shoulders, and that is from years of doing overhead work in the gym and from years of playing cricket without necessarily doing any of this in my younger years, any of this sort of mobility work. But I'm slowly getting better, which is good, all right? And so this is then one you can just roll through. Hopefully I'm keeping my back nice and straight as I do that and getting those shoulders to really extend through there, and you can just come back out. And once again, this can be slightly more active. And so this is almost a bit of a workout and an exercise. If you're really engaging your core well as you do that, you're going to feel that. You know, you're going to do a little bit of work doing that, but you're also going to get a really nice stretch in there at the end range. And once again, I'd encourage you to pause a little bit at that end range, just to get a little bit of extra stretch in there. All right. So those are my 13 ways to use the foam roller. Hopefully they've been beneficial for you. I'm almost working up a bit of a sweat there towards the end, getting into those. It's not so easy keeping talking whilst doing all of the exercises, but I hope those all made sense. I hope they answered all of your questions. I do remember there was one question, and I'm not sure if this person is online or not, but there was one question in regards to ankylosing spondylitis. Now, ankylosing spondylitis is a condition where the ligaments down the length of your spine do start to calcify. And so it is one I think that you probably really need to speak to your healthcare professional about, because it does depend on the degree to which that ankylosing spondylitis has set in as to whether doing these sort of exercises would be a good idea. I would definitely suggest not doing the one where you're rolling the roller up and down your spine. I would think that the one with you laying lengthways on the roller may be appropriate, so long as it's not too uncomfortable. But I think it's probably one you do need to chat to your health professional about before embarking on something like this, because that is a bit of a specific case. But aside from that, you guys have stuck with me well tonight. I've still got good numbers in here tuning in. So I hope you enjoyed it. If there are any additional questions, then please put them in the chat now and I'll answer them before I go. Otherwise, I'm going to get ready to wind up for the evening. If you're watching this in my YouTube channel or you're watching this later inside the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group, then the Healthy Lifestyle Choices group is the best spot to go if you have any questions for me. So I will edit this a little bit, mostly just sort of take out the start while I'm waiting for you guys to come on board, and I'll put it into that Healthy Lifestyle Choices group, and that's the best spot to go under that post and ask any questions you've got, because that's the easiest spot to find me, basically, and that's where I try and invest most of my time into that group. And of course, the best thing about being in that group is you will find out about all of the future events that we're doing. So next month, I can tell you my webinar is going to be all about how to maintain brain health. And so that's going to be a lot of great stuff in terms of physical, mental, emotional things. There's been a lot of research coming out in the last couple of months. If you've been tuning into my This Week in Wellness podcast, you'll have seen there's been some really interesting research coming out about brain health and dementia that I think you're going to want to hear about. And so I'm going to include all of that into my workshop next month on brain health. And so that's going to be a really good one. So if you are, as I said, the best spot to do is join the Healthy Lifestyle Choices Facebook group, because that's where you'll find all the information and get all of the updates. Otherwise, I'm going to love you and leave you guys. I'm going to finish up here. I'm going to record my podcast, and I'm going to head home to my lovely family. So have a wonderful evening, and I'll look forward to speaking to you all soon. Ciao.